Have Gun Will Travel, Season 6, Episode 6, Birds of a Feather, Detailed Summary. The sixth episode of Have Gun Will Travel Season 6, titled Birds of a Feather, continues the series' tradition of combining classic Western storytelling with thoughtful examinations of human nature. While many Western dramas focus almost entirely on shootouts, chases, and conflicts between outlaws and lawmen, this episode explores much deeper themes, including loyalty, friendship, reputation, identity, and the complicated relationships that develop between people who share similar experiences. Through Paladin's journey, the episode examines an old question that remains relevant in every generation. Do people naturally seek out others who resemble them? Or do similarities simply reveal hidden truths about who they really are? The story begins with Paladin leaving his comfortable surroundings in San Francisco and accepting another assignment that takes him into a less civilized part of the frontier. As always, his transition between these two worlds immediately highlights one of the most interesting aspects of his character. In San Francisco, Paladin is refined, sophisticated, and intellectual. He enjoys literature, music, elegant clothing, and meaningful conversation. On the frontier, however, he becomes a practical survivor, capable of defending himself in dangerous situations while maintaining the moral code that distinguishes him from ordinary gunfighters. Upon arriving at his destination, Paladin quickly realizes that the situation is more complicated than he originally expected. A conflict involving several individuals has created divisions within the local community. Relationships that once appeared stable have become strained, and long-standing friendships are beginning to collapse under the weight of suspicion and misunderstanding. The episode's title, Birds of a Feather, immediately introduces one of its central ideas. The phrase comes from the well-known expression, birds of a feather flock together, suggesting that people are naturally drawn toward those who share similar values, interests, or personalities. Throughout the episode, this expression becomes both a literal observation and a philosophical question. Are friendships based on genuine understanding, or are they simply created through convenience and shared circumstances? Paladin becomes involved after encountering individuals whose relationships are built upon common experiences, but whose loyalties are beginning to shift. As he listens to their stories, he notices that the conflict is not really about a single disagreement. Instead, it reflects years of unspoken frustration, emotional dependence, and conflicting expectations. One of the episode's strongest themes involves the difference between similarity and compatibility. People often assume that sharing common experiences automatically creates strong relationships. However, the episode demonstrates that similarity alone is rarely enough to sustain trust. True friendship requires respect, honesty, and a willingness to accept differences. Paladin understands this better than most people because his own life has been defined by unusual relationships. He moves constantly between different social classes and communities. He can comfortably share a meal with wealthy businessmen in San Francisco and then spend the following day traveling across the wilderness with ranchers, miners, or cowboys. This flexibility allows him to form connections with a wide variety of people, but it also prevents him from becoming completely attached to any particular group. As he begins investigating the situation, Paladin discovers that several individuals are trapped by their own assumptions about loyalty. They believe that friendship automatically requires agreement. When disagreements emerge, they interpret them as personal betrayals. Paladin challenges this perspective. He argues that meaningful relationships cannot survive without independence. Friends should not be expected to think alike all the time. Instead, they should respect one another's individuality. The supporting characters bring different interpretations of loyalty into the story. One individual views loyalty as unconditional support. Another believes loyalty must be earned through actions. Someone else believes that loyalty should never require sacrificing personal principles. These competing definitions create much of the episode's emotional tension. As the narrative develops, it becomes clear that reputation plays an important role in shaping everyone's behavior. People carry expectations based on their previous experiences. Some characters find themselves unable to escape labels assigned to them years earlier. Others become prisoners of identities they have created for themselves. Paladin has always been fascinated by the relationship between reputation and reality because his own life constantly forces him to confront that issue. Many people assume that a professional gunfighter must be violent, ruthless, and emotionally detached. Yet Paladin consistently demonstrates the opposite. He values intelligence over intimidation. He prefers negotiation over violence. He often resolves conflicts through conversation rather than force. This contradiction allows him to recognize similar contradictions in others. The episode also examines the influence of social groups. People naturally seek belonging. Communities provide security, support, and identity. However, communities can also create pressure. Individuals sometimes suppress their own beliefs to avoid being rejected by the people around them. Several characters in the episode face exactly this dilemma. They must decide whether to remain loyal to familiar relationships or follow their own moral instincts. These choices become increasingly difficult as tensions rise. Paladin approaches the situation carefully. Rather than immediately choosing sides, he observes. He asks questions. He studies behavior. His method resembles that of a detective as much as that of a gunfighter. He understands that people often reveal their true motivations through small details. Words can be misleading. Actions are much harder to disguise. As conversations continue, hidden resentments gradually begin surfacing. Old conflicts that were never fully resolved suddenly reappear. The characters realize that their relationships have been built on unstable foundations. What once appeared to be friendship may actually have been convenience. What once appeared to be loyalty may have been dependence. This emotional uncertainty gives the episode much of its power. The Western setting provides an effective backdrop because frontier communities often depended heavily on cooperation. People lived far from established institutions. Neighbors frequently relied on one another for survival. Under such circumstances, trust became incredibly valuable. At the same time, betrayal could be devastating. The episode explores this reality by showing how fragile relationships become when communication breaks down. Another important theme involves personal identity. Who are people when they are separated from the groups that define them? Can they maintain their principles without external validation? Can they continue believing in themselves when their closest relationships begin changing? Paladin confronts these questions regularly because his independent lifestyle forces him to define himself according to his own values rather than according to society's expectations. His example becomes an important influence on the other characters. He demonstrates that independence does not require isolation. A person can maintain strong relationships without sacrificing individuality. The emotional complexity of the story increases as misunderstandings are gradually replaced by uncomfortable truths. Several characters begin recognizing that they have been unfair. Others realize they have allowed pride to prevent honest communication. Some discover that they have been projecting their own insecurities onto the people around them. These realizations create opportunities for growth. One of the most interesting aspects of the episode is the way it avoids creating obvious villains. No one is completely right. No one is completely wrong. Instead, every character behaves according to their own experiences and emotional limitations. This moral complexity has always distinguished Have Gun Will Travel from many other Western programs. Rather than presenting simple conflicts between heroes and villains, the series consistently explores the complicated realities of human behavior. Paladin's role is not to impose judgment. Instead, he encourages self-reflection. He creates situations in which people are forced to examine their assumptions. He asks difficult questions. He challenges emotional defenses. Most importantly, he refuses to accept easy explanations. The physical environment also reinforces the story's themes. The open landscapes of the frontier symbolize freedom, but they also emphasize isolation. The characters live in a world where survival often depends on cooperation, yet they must also preserve their own identities. Balancing these two needs becomes one of the episode's greatest challenges. As the story approaches its climax, emotional confrontations replace physical confrontations. The greatest battles in the episode are not fought with weapons. They are fought through conversations. Characters who have avoided difficult discussions finally begin expressing their true feelings. Long-standing misunderstandings begin disappearing. Relationships are redefined. Trust slowly begins returning. Paladin remains an observer as much as a participant. He understands that genuine reconciliation cannot be forced. People must choose it for themselves. His guidance helps create the conditions necessary for healing, but the final decisions belong to the individuals involved. The title becomes even more meaningful during the final scenes. Birds of a Feather no longer refers simply to similarity. Instead, it becomes a reminder that human relationships are far more complicated than shared experiences. People may come together because they resemble one another, but they remain together because they develop mutual respect. Without respect, even the strongest similarities eventually become meaningless. The episode concludes with a sense of cautious optimism. The characters have not solved every problem. Some emotional wounds remain. Some relationships will require additional time to heal. However, progress has been made. People have begun listening instead of assuming. They have started valuing honesty over pride. Most importantly, they have recognized that loyalty should strengthen relationships rather than limit them. As always, Paladin prepares to continue his journey. His work is complete. Another community has benefited from his wisdom, and another lesson has been learned. Yet his departure also reminds viewers of something important. Paladin himself remains a solitary figure. He helps others build stronger relationships while continuing to live a life defined by movement. This contradiction adds a subtle layer of melancholy to the episode. He teaches others about connection while remaining permanently disconnected from any one place. Ultimately, Birds of a Feather succeeds because it transforms a familiar expression into a thoughtful exploration of friendship and identity. The episode asks important questions without offering simplistic answers. What creates loyalty? How much similarity is necessary for friendship? Can people maintain individuality while belonging to a community? These questions remain just as relevant today as they were during the era portrayed in the series. Through intelligent dialogue, emotionally complex characters, and Paladin's thoughtful guidance, the episode delivers another memorable story that demonstrates why Have Gun Will Travel remains one of television's most sophisticated Western dramas. The frontier setting may belong to another century, but the emotional conflicts explored in Birds of a Feather are timeless. People continue searching for belonging. They continue struggling to balance independence with loyalty. And they continue discovering that the strongest relationships are not built on similarity alone, but on understanding, respect, and the willingness to accept one another's differences.